Ladies and gentlemen, to F1 2020. Okay, and today we are gonna do a video. We're gonna start a new series, okay, on how to master F1 2020, obviously. And I'm gonna, well, during this series, okay, I'm gonna show you my top tips on how to become a decent driver on F1 2020. This is obviously episode number 1, so obviously there will be most likely further episodes in due course. I'm not gonna give a like a timeline sort of reference, so basically subscribe to the channel if you want to see further videos, okay. But firstly, we're gonna get into obviously our first video today on how to become good on F1 2020. Now, obviously, the car does have a great deal to do with how your performance usually is in Formula 1. Okay, usually if you go for the best car, 9 times out of 10, that does help. So going for the Mercedes, Ferrari, even though the Ferrari in real life isn't the car to choose right now, but going for the Ferrari, the Red Bull, will give you a great advantage, unlike if you go for the Williams or Haas. But neither here or there. Okay, that don't mean you can't get a good result in any of these cars if you learn how to perform well in them. But we're gonna take the, let's say, the Renault, okay, and we'll drive it around Australia and teach you a few tricks on how to do well, firstly in the dry and then in the rain as well. Now, obviously, okay, first we'll talk about the assists. Okay, so obviously, as you can see, you get to choose what assists you want to have on. The more assists you have on, technically, whilst this does help, okay, in some cases it helps even with braking, and now in 2020 I believe you can even do a casual mode, which even helps in a way with steering. But at the same time, okay, the less assists you have on, effectively, if you can master with less assists, okay, that works out even better for you, because it means, well, you're doing more things yourself. However, at the same time, it actually does help, because as soon as you start mastering it, you've actually got a whole lot more grip. You can explore the circuit a lot more and extend them track limits a whole lot more, which is obviously what you want to do in racing. Obviously, weather does also play a vital role in that. Obviously, if you do it on a wet circuit, the car will handle differently to a dry circuit as well. And also, when you go out in qualifying as well, that can be another vital factor. You don't really, well, you're never going to set your best lap necessarily at the start of the qualifying session, because the track is green, and therefore when the track is green, it's at its most slipperiest, compared to when the track is more rubbered in. There's more then grip given from the tyres, which helps obviously your overall lap time. So in this first episode, I'm going to first teach you about racing lines, because, yeah, you know, I think that'd be very important. Now, what is the racing line? The racing line is the ideal line going into a corner. Now, there is multiple lines you can take into a corner. For instance, turn 1 at Australia, I'm just going to show you firstly how to take this corner wrongly. As you can see, that's off the racing line. Now, if I go back and take it on the racing line, okay, you'll see the big difference, okay, between taking that corner on the racing line. You can carry a whole lot more speed through the corner, okay, and then that's the ideal line going into that corner. Now, obviously, there is obviously sometimes in some corners multiple racing lines, like through this corner here. Some people like to drift out a bit more wide than others, and same goes for more or less any corner. So whilst the typical racing line is technically the quickest way through the corner, however, it's not necessarily the quickest way to get around the corner, because some people have different lines going into corners. Some people like to brake a bit late and maybe carry a bit more apex speed, whilst others like to maybe take a little bit less speed into the corner but prefer to get on the power nice and early, which means they have a bit more exit speed through obviously the corner, whilst others like to try and keep it more in the middle and be a bit more, let's say, consistent. So obviously the racing line does have a big impact on lap time as well. In fact, if I was to take all these corners wrongly, you'd probably lose half a dozen worth of seconds as well. And obviously, as you'll see, I'm going to actually try and take a lap without taking the ideal racing line to show you what a lap would look like. So we're heading into turn 1 then for the first one, and you can see already I'm losing time not only through the corner but also through the exit of the corner and down the straights, but I'm having to also brake earlier in the corner. Now obviously it's not great ideal. As you can see, this lap is very scruffy, and obviously as you can see we're losing a lot of time through this. We're already lost, well, 2 seconds, but you can see through not taking the ideal racing line, you can just see we're having to slow the car down a whole lot more than if we were to be on the actual racing line. And I'll now show you also a lap where we're on the racing line, and I'll show you the big fundamental difference of basically how much difference the racing line actually does. And it is actually one of the most vital things actually probably in racing. I know a lot of people know what racing line is, but for beginners, obviously, maybe a lot of beginners don't know what racing line is, and therefore obviously it's good education, I hope. Anyway, as you can see already on the racing line, as you can see, taking the ideal line into the corners, and we're already half a second up, and that's on our personal best lap, let alone our last lap. We're probably around a second or more right now up on our last lap right now, which is pretty insane when you think of it, how much time you can just find just through being on the racing line. Now, as I say, we're not running traction. I'm only running like 1 assist, sort of. You could call it assist. It's sort of a semi-assist, I like to refer it as, and that's so we don't really lock up any of our tyres. Otherwise, I'm not using any assist. As you can see, manual gears, no traction control, and all of that. So really, I'm using absolutely nothing. Now, I'm going to show you a lap, what it'd be like to use assists, and then we're going to compare that lap to, obviously, a lap without assists. So, I'm going to go on beginner, okay, to firstly show you what a lap would be like on beginner, and then, obviously, I'll show you a lap on, obviously, the assists I use. So, out of the final corner. Now, the benefit of obviously running assists, as you can see, you can actually see where the racing line is. That is obviously a benefit, and you barely have to brake for the corners. Obviously, you can do a competitive lap still. As you can see, we're a 10th up on my overall best lap time. So, that's alright, but as you can see, I would say, well, when we came around last time around, remember we were about a 10th up or 6/10 up or something crazy like this, and now we're losing time even on our own personal best lap. And as you can see, for me, like, I can do a lap easily on it with assists, but you do lose an awful lot of time. Now, if you could master that As you can see, that wasn't ideal, but if you can master this, I imagine you could get relatively close to probably the Williams lap time that I've done, 1:23.5, but to be honest, it's not ever going to be quick when you're racing, and you're gonna lose a whole lot of time. In fact, I'll just do a second lap, see if we can improve or get any better. You don't have to really think too much about the braking. Right now I'm not even touching the brake, and I'm using a controller, so just so you know. But as you can see, you don't really have to think an awful lot about the braking, as the braking is practically done automatically for you. The only thing you really have to think about is the steering, which obviously isn't that hard to do. The steering and the throttle input, that's the only thing you're really thinking about right now, I'm finding. And other than that, it's pretty much easy. I'm not even having to open my own DRS, which, yeah, just makes it a whole lot easier, and a little bit wide there. So you can still make mistakes, which is very clear. However, don't forget, I'm pushing this to the absolute limit right now on this, well, sort of to the limit, and half a second off our personal best. Now, I'm not saying we could have done better, well, I'm not saying we couldn't have done better there, we clearly could have, but, as you can tell, that is practically what assist does. So basically we did a 24. Now, to give you an idea, maybe for someone who is more experienced, for like myself, obviously give you an idea of how much quicker running without assists is. Well, this will give you roughly that idea, I hope. What running assists or without assists benefits, obviously. Now, yes, you have to do a lot more. For instance, you have to change the gears, you have to, well, you've got no braking line, so you have to select your own racing line going into the corners. But, as you'll see, already first corner, and we're so much up already compared to our own delta on last lap. It's unbelievably much more better to master the game without assists than it is with it. Yes, okay, you may have one or two sloppy errors like that, obviously, from time to time, as you just saw, like a slide, you may make small mistakes like that, but, you know, as you can see, there is so much more time to be found without the assists than there is with the assists. But how do you get to that stage, you know, running without assists? Obviously, that's the bigger question. And quite simply, the truthful answer is, just take it slowly. Try and reduce the assists. So start off with all the assists, especially if you're really, really new to any F1 game. Start off with all the assists, and then, you know, maybe try and cut back on the number of assists you're running. Maybe go from, you know, running full traction control to running medium traction control. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it like that, but run maybe with obviously less braking assists. So obviously get used to maybe where your braking points are, and you get used to where your braking points are, and you're learning where you're accelerating, then obviously that's at least one thing extra you know now. So you now know, okay, for this corner you brake here, for that corner you brake there, and this is where you're gonna start roughly accelerating out of the corner. So you sort of get muscle reflex as well, which obviously benefits you as the gamer or player. And you can see this lap is pretty decent right now. This is actually a very decent lap. But as you can see, this is running without assist, all but one assist really, sort of, which is only to stop me locking up, and you can just see how much time there is to be found. It's a lot of time in the car that can be found just through not running assists, which is quite decent indeed. Out of the final corner, this is gonna smash my personal best lap time out of the park. There you go. Like, that wasn't, as you can see, the best lap ever. Of course we can do a better lap, I reckon, in a better car. But you can see there, that is how much time there is to be found without running assist. And as I say, how you get there? Well, my main tip, obviously, first learn your racing lines. So yes, you need to start off with using assists. The main ones I used, obviously at first, I probably took this one off first, maybe had it on low. Okay, so I'd suggest turning that to a low, sort of customize it. I kept obviously this one on, same with this one. Okay, and I'll probably just do that. Okay, so you sort of learn where the brake assist is, and eventually move that from low to obviously off, and then okay, at least you learn now where you're gonna start braking, and then you have control of not only the steering but also then the braking of the car, which obviously will help you. Okay, because you'll know, okay, right, for this corner I need to brake here. Obviously, another way you could also learn this as well in terms of your braking points is doing a couple of races and following the AI, because the AI are going to brake exactly where you need to brake, if not a little bit later than what you need to do. So following the AI in a race, maybe a short 5-lap races, will also help a little bit as well in terms of learning the braking points. But learn your braking points and learn your obviously your acceleration points and the racing line. So certainly them 3 things would help to have first on and keep everything more or less the same. If you want to get further, obviously, you probably then eventually need to start using manual gears. I suggest go to manual gears first, maybe manual suggested gear, because then this obviously, well, I'll show you what suggested gear does. As you'll see, suggested gear will tell you basically exactly when to upshift and what gear you should be in. As you can see, it says there what gear we need to be in for the next corner, exactly telling me what gear now we should be in for each corner basically, as you can see. So telling me here, 4th gear, there you go, 4th gear, as you can see. So that really does help if you want to learn how to use gears. Obviously, that again, just another thing. Obviously, it all takes time, so don't rush it and put in the hours to practice it, and eventually you will get there. And then eventually you can probably even turn this off. Once you've learned the gears, actually, you could probably then start, you know, reducing the traction control as well. After you've learned the gears, so start turning this down to medium, and then once you got like a medium traction control, as you'll see, you'll be able to not necessarily fully well, you won't be able to necessarily fully you know, lose control of the car, but you will be able to slide the car a little bit around, like just ever so slightly. You'll be able to slide the car like around the track a little bit more, which obviously benefits you. But as I say, you won't like have full control of that, but you will be able to slide the car around a lot more, and you'll be able to make maybe occasionally errors like that, as you just saw, and you know, basically smash it into the wall. And then once you feel confident with with medium, eventually be very patient, be very smooth. Try and be smooth at first. Okay, that's how I would suggest it. So learn to just be smooth, as you can see. Just not tap it aggressively, but just be smooth with everything. And the smoother you learn it, you know, try and be smooth with your upshifts, okay, and gradually learn how to plant the throttle. That's how you'd ideally learn, you know, all this in the ideal world. Just be smooth, and then down the straights you can obviously give it the taps, but just back off a little bit earlier and be smooth. And again, learn, not relearn your racing lines, but relearn your racing lines a little bit. Like, learn where you feel a bit more now confident to brake. But at this point, you know, once you've learned your braking zones, you should have a fair idea how to sort of get the other bit done. But yeah, once you can then take off all the traction control and get into basically these settings, obviously what I usually have, as you'll see, you'll basically be able to, you know, get the maximum from the car, and you'll basically be able to do a very decent lap time. Like, I know, obviously, I'm not saying I make it look easy, and I know it ain't easy, certainly not by no stretch of imagination, but, you know, at the end of the day, once you get there, I think you'll be very pleased. Obviously, right, next video, we'll probably be teaching you about racing, actual wheel-to-wheel combat, and just some maneuvers that you can try and perform during the race. Until then, guys, have a great day. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. Have a great day.